live stream up.
But said something, don't forget something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's National Bleeding Disorders Foundation Wednesday webinar. My name is Naomi Miller, Programs and Partnership Specialist on the research team, and I'm today's host. The title of this webinar, From Blueprint to Collaborative, National Research Blueprint Now, the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be made available shortly after it ends at the NBDF website at bleeding.org. We encourage you to ask questions. Any questions you may have, you can ask by utilizing the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and you can put your questions there at any time during the webinar. Following our speakers' presentations, we will give your questions to them. Today, we are joined by Dr. Michael Recht, who entered the role of Chief Medical and Scientific Officer at NBDF in early 2023. In addition to this role, Dr. Recht is a pediatric hematologist at Yale University School of Medicine with over 30 years experience in the bleeding disorder community. We are also joined by Maria Santaella. She is the Vice President of Research Strategy at the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. She leads major initiatives, including the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative, the Research Grants Program, and Community Voices in Research, with a strong focus on patient-centered research and community engagement. With over 30 years of clinical and research experience, she brings deep expertise in hemostasis and a passion for advancing health equity. And lastly, our lead speaker, Sammie Valadez, is a highly regarded member of the inheritable bleeding disorder community and a lived experience expert. Diagnosed with von Willebrand disease at the age of 32, she navigates her personal journey with remarkable resilience. Beyond being a person with VWD, Sam is a devoted mother to a daughter with VWD and another with both Factor VII deficiency and VWD. Her significant contributions extend to the development of the National Research Blueprint, where she serves as the co-chair for the Lee Working Group and as a steering committee member. Sammie played a pivotal role in shaping the term lived experience expert and recognizes the importance of active involvement in research to enhance the lives of individuals affected by inheritable bleeding disorders. Sammie currently serves as Vice President of the Bleeding Disorders Alliance of Illinois. Her extensive involvement in the community reflects her commitment to making positive impact on the lives of those affected by bleeding disorders. Beyond her professional commitments, Sammie is a passionate advocate, devoted mother, loving wife, and steadfast friend. I will now pass it over to Maria to take it from here. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Naomi, for that great introduction, and welcome everyone to this week's webinar. From Blueprint to Collaborative, the National Research Blueprint is now the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative. Okay, thank you. Next slide. About NBDF. So our mission at the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, it's really we're dedicated to finding cures for inheritable blood and bleeding disorders and to addressing and preventing the complication of these disorders through research, education, and advocacy. enabling people and families to thrive. And we do that through different areas of focus. In addition, of course, of hemophilias, which was in our name for 75 years. We also are focused on rare and ultra rare bleeding disorders and von Willebrand's disease. We have a special interest in digital health and, of course, mental health, which we all know is very important in chronic illnesses, especially in bleeding disorders, and also on future therapies, right? How can we enhance the therapies that we have available to us to make sure that we have the most up-to-date, the most innovative therapies for us? Next slide, please. So these are our presenter disclosures. Sammie and I have nothing to disclose, and Dr. Recht is Board of Directors and Partners in Bleeding Disorders. Next slide, please. Yeah. So just to orient you a little bit about how we're going to structure this talk, first of all, we're going to talk about our research department and our goal as a research department within NBDF. We're going to talk about the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative, specifically, one of the biggest initiatives that we have, and giving you ideas and tools of how to get involved. And of course, we'll leave a time at the end for Q&A. Next slide, please. So I want you guys to all stop and imagine a world where every research priority in the inheritable bleeding disorders is shaped by the people it affects the most, where the inclusion of that lived experience ensures that research is relevant and truly impactful, that all research questions are grounded on that lived experience, so that research is answering the questions you need to live your best life, where trust is built through strong collaborations between researchers and members of the community, including patients, right? People with inheritable bleeding disorders. And we're measuring outcomes and impact in a way that truly reflects the actual needs and challenges of the community. Next slide, please. So that is exactly what we're trying to do at NBDF's research department. Next slide, please. So our three main focus is what we're trying to accomplish as a department within the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation is really truly to address gaps in knowledge that can improve the lives of people affected by these disorders, to ensure, again, that lived experience drives and influences the research process, and at all times promote equity, diversity, and inclusion so that research findings includes everyone, right? That the epitome is equity in healthcare. Next slide, please. So of course, I'm here as a speaker representing the work of my department, but I just want to do a little shout out to all the members here. Dr. Reich, you already know, but Sam, Hallie, Naomi is our moderator today, and Matt, who are on behind the scenes doing all the work that I just get to explain to you today. So thank you for all you do. Next slide. All right, so start with first things first, right? Lived experience experts. So throughout the whole process, we were trying to figure out a way in which we could emphasize the important perspective that people that wake up with bleeding disorders have. It's unique, it's important, and it should really drive and influence anything that affects them. So throughout our journey as a department of only 6 years, almost 7 years old, we really wanted to capture the essence of that expertise that we cannot find anywhere else, and that's why it was so important for us to engage and to bring it into all things that we do. So an esteemed group of lived experience experts helped us arrive to this number one, that term, lived experience expert, but also the definition that reads like this. These are individuals, their caregivers and family members directly impacted by inheritable bleeding disorders. Their diverse and personal knowledge gives them the unique ability to translate lived experiences into meaningful system change. Based on this important perspective, LEEs should, to the best of their abilities, influence and/or drive bleeding disorders research. They should reflect the diversity as vast as those that affected by them. So again, this is a very comprehensive definition that was actually developed by LEEs themselves. So we're very proud, and I bring it on as a first slide because we will be referencing from now on anybody with a bleeding disorders and their their unaffected caregivers and family members will be referred to as LEEs or LEEs. You will also find QR codes throughout the presentation, and that just gives you additional links and additional resources that hopefully you'll find interesting. Next slide, please. So how do we create opportunities to increase meaningful lead collaboration, right? It's not just lead collaboration, but it's meaningful lead collaborations. One that they can actually feel that they are participating and being listened to, and that we are actually executing on recommendations that they provide. So one of the ones is bleeding disorders research. We will talk for the rest of the presentation, which is a community-based initiative focused on making research more collaborative and representative, and ensuring that the lived experiences and actually all principles of health equity influences it. Community Voices in Research is a community-powered registry that is collecting that experience through electronic surveys. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides. It also provides two-way communication through a personalized dashboard. And then we have other things like virtual and in-person advisory panels, in which they are moderated panels in which we gather input from people affected by these disorders, anything from educational materials to research protocols, and of course our grants program and more. Next slide, please. So CVR, Community Voices in Research. Our goal is to turn that experience into evidence. Next slide, please. So what is CVR? Again, there's the QR code. It collects information directly from persons affected by inheritable bleeding disorders. Again, turning that experience into evidence. One person is one story, but 100 stories, it becomes evidence. Complements other research efforts in the community with that lived experience. We have a lot of efforts in the community trying to gather the clinical aspects of the disorders, the medical aspects of the disorder, which of course are important, but we feel that perspective adds to that lived perspective adds to that. Again, through a personalized dashboard, it offers participants data, resources, other tools, and other opportunities to get engaged in other research efforts, with the ultimate goal of getting them to become more active members of the healthcare team. And with everything that we do, it centers research on that lived experience. It provides ideas, it provides concepts, it provides research questions that perhaps we would not know unless we had an effort like this. Next slide, please. So anyway, consider joining. We have over 1,300 participants who are already helping define what it means to live with the bleeding disorders. So if you're a person affected by them or have family members affected by them, consider joining. Family members are welcome to join as well. And if you are a researcher or a healthcare provider, please help us create awareness and help us drive enrollment. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'll toss it on to Sammie so that she can give us a little bit of her experience.
It won't let me start my video, but I can go ahead and start talking while Naomi turns me back on.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I started in the SOS, which was the beginning of the NRB and the BDRC, as we're calling it now. It has gone from stage to stage. And through that process, I was able to start there and work my way into it and be as involved as I chose to be, all the way up to being a co-chair and thankfully the first lived experience expert of the year in 2024. So I started in the SOS as a group that was like a working group, but it really wasn't. It was more of a panel. And then from there, we went and met and turned into the NRB. And then they had working groups. So then when we all came together, I wanted to be part of a working group. So I volunteered for that. And then I volunteered to be a co-chair. And then I've just continued to be in it. And with being a co-chair, I was on the steering committee for it. And our working group was all lived experience experts. And then we had lived experience experts in each and every one of the other working groups that was an ambassador back to the lead working group on what each working group was doing. And then we had other leads planted in each working group that weren't necessarily in the lead working group, so that we made sure that every working group had a lead in it. Now, we started as a subject matter expert, and we as a group decided that subject matter experts was very broad and didn't define us enough from the researchers, because they're also subject matter experts. So that's when we came up with the name for us as lived experience experts. And then through that, we created the definition of what a lived experience expert is. And through that, we've also become heady champions for the health, equity, and diversity group, in being leads, because we're able to make sure that we represent everybody. So the experience that I've had, I do not have any medical background or any research background. So I came just as a lived experience expert and a mom. So I do carry both roles there. And through this, I've been able to make sure that my voice is heard. And if my voice can be heard, your voice can be heard. And we do need leads. And we will talk about how you can join us later. Next.
Thank you, Sammie. So I will now pass it on to Dr. Michael Recht, who will carry us on to the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Sammie. Thanks, Naomi. Really looking forward to talking more about the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative and where we are after almost 5 years of work through NBDF, starting with our prior CEO, Dr. Len Valentino's vision of creating a more inclusive manner to do research that's as impactful as possible. So, Naomi, could you please play the video?
For her, for him, and for anyone with an inheritable bleeding disorder, we see a bright future of better diagnosis and care, and maybe one day, a cure. We are striving to bring generational impact to the bleeding disorders community through the creation of a national coordinated approach to research. The Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative, or BDRC, is an initiative designed by the community and for the community, and championed by the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. Our goal? To transform bleeding disorder care through collaborative research defined by the needs of lived experience experts. Achieving this goal requires patients and caregivers affected by these disorders. Lived experience experts, or LEEs, have an active role throughout the research process to inform, guide, and communicate the results of research.
A lot of the benefit of having a LEE involved in research is that personal experience and that opportunity to reflect on their historical experience as a person with bleeding and bring that forward so that the researcher understands all of the background that's been involved in terms of having a bleeding disorder and what that entails. We feel that this type of approach really benefits the researcher as much as it benefits the patient.
An integrated multi-year effort with representatives and LEEs from across the bleeding disorders community has defined a roadmap toward actionable goals. This coordinated approach will help us to speed our progress, generate new ideas, and develop solutions for all inheritable bleeding disorders. Inclusivity is critical to make progress in supporting a broad and diverse community. This is why the BDRC is designed to ensure our community is equitably represented in research with the goal of unlocking broad access to the best possible care for everyone.
It's extremely important to prioritize the advancement of research in the bleeding disorders community. This can help us to fill information voids and gaps, which is particularly important and relevant to the rare disease space. All diagnoses within the bleeding disorders realm are welcomed and extremely encouraged to participate and have their voices heard, because the more voices we bring to the table and have contributing, the more likely we are to have data and research questions that are representative of our community as a whole.
Our goal is to have the entire community coalesce behind this initiative and work hand in hand with lived experience experts to generate new knowledge. Our ultimate goal is to ensure that these findings are not only truly aligned with the preferences of lived experience experts that are actually meeting their needs, but that they're also representatives of everybody in the community and that they're grounded in principles of health, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This important initiative will only be successful if the community coalesces and gets involved. We're very excited with the progress that we've done to date, and we hope to continue into the future and where the entire research community is working.
Naomi, can we go on to the next slide? It seems like it stopped with just a second to go. Great. So let's talk about exactly what the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative is. And like I said, this is really the culmination. It's really a culmination of almost 5 years of work right now and ongoing, where we're trying to build a transformational research infrastructure by engaging the entire community. And we're doing this by completely rethinking how we prioritize and how we fund research, all around questions that matter for people living with inheritable bleeding disorders. We're reorienting and democratizing the research culture in our field. And the whole idea is we're going to come out with outcomes that are really going to move our field forward, and we're going to be able to communicate them much better. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do is take all the advances that have occurred in the inheritable bleeding disorder field in the past couple of years, including newer technology, newer tools, the changes in how funding is occurring in our field, and how we're trying to improve community engagement. And then we're going to coordinate all those efforts across our entire community by including lived experience experts in an impactful and a meaningful way in every step of the process. Our goal is to develop this collaborative network that can help accelerate real progress that has been shown to matter to LEAs. So next slide, please. So where have we been and where are we going? So as Sammie's talked about, we started with the SOS, or the State of the Science. And this occurred starting during the COVID pandemic in 2020 and went into 2021. And during the State of the Science, what we did was discover what we knew at that time, and we defined and ranked different research priorities. After we worked through that process, we moved through to phase 2, which we called the National Research Blueprint, where we identified resource and infrastructure needs to get us where we wanted to go. And we are now moving into phase 3, or the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative. And I do want to thank everybody who participated in the surveys that we put out to help name this phase 3. We actually walked our talk and involved the entire community when we were naming this phase of the project. And here we're really going to start to implement what we've built over the past 5 years and start to write grants to raise funds to do meaningful research. So next slide, please. So we have specific values in the BDRC, and those values are all around the way we listen to each other, the way we respond to each other, the way we take time to reflect and process what we're thinking and what other people are thinking and saying, and taking that and turning it all into action. And this is all based on the idea that we are accountable to each other, that we respect each other, that we are completely transparent in everything that we do, and we value the entirety of our community. Next slide. So this is another way to see where we've been and where we're going. And you can see, like I said, this started all the way back in 2019 with Dr. Valentino's Blue Sky Vision, where he gathered focus groups and surveys and listened to people to help get a better understanding of what was important that led to the development of the state of the science, leading into the National Research Blueprint. We are now currently writing up the methods and the results of the National Research Blueprints. Those have all been submitted for publication. Each one of those documents, which is fairly extensive, all has what has been turned into being called a plain language summary. So we take out all the complicated doctor and researcher speak and have a section in each one of those documents that people can understand better. So next slide, please. The vision of the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative is the understanding that in order to thrive in the face of being impacted by an inheritable bleeding disorder, it all begins with community-inspired research. And the mission of the BDRC is that we will serve to advance an accessible standard of care and quality of life for all who are affected by inheritable bleeding disorders. And most importantly of all those bullet points is the very bottom one. It's fully informed by our lived experience expert collaborators who are key team members in development and implementation. So next slide, please. We do have some guiding principles, and I'm not going to go through every bullet point, but just very high level is we will and we do and always will demonstrate mutual respect for all our strategies and actions within the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative. We have genuine collaboration, which leads to authentic partnerships. And finally, all our communication is respectful and it demonstrates effective interpersonal interactions. Next slide. So how does it work? I view this essentially as a hopper because I'm from Wisconsin, or a funnel where you start out very broad. At the very top, we send out proposals, we send out messages soliciting research proposals. So getting concepts that are based on what has already been identified as priorities from the various working groups from the National Research Blueprint. Then we help people who are interested take those concepts and turn them into actual research protocols. Once we get the protocols written and approved, we activate them. We budget for the protocols. We roll them out to institutional review boards, which are the organizations that ensure participant safety is always top consideration. And we have our Lee advisors and our health equity, diversity, inclusion advisors look at every single thing we do to make sure that we have not missed anything. And finally, we implement those protocols. We conduct the studies, we collect the data, we analyze the data, and we publish and disseminate the findings. Everywhere you see a blood drop on this slide, This is showing you the steps where the Lee ambassadors, which I'm going to talk about next, play a key role. And you can see that the Lee ambassadors play a key role in every single step of the process. So next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Research Ambassador Program. So we want to evolve the participation of the lived experience expert from purely subjects in research to ambassadors for research. And in order to do that, we are creating the Research Ambassador Program, which has a full continuum of participation. And each individual who's interested in participating in this ambassador program can engage as much as you want or as little as you want. And you can see the steps as we envision them on the bottom of the slide, where people are start out as being engaged. They're interested in research. They want to learn more about what it means to participate. So that's the informed participant. Then, if they're interested in participating even more, they get training and become a vital team member to researchers and clinicians and data managers to help design studies that have direct impact, and eventually, with appropriate training and experience, can actually become a leader in our research field. This has never been done in any other field. There are multiple other fields where research collaboratives have been built. There is not a single other field that gives a road to research leadership other than what we're building through the BDRC. So next slide. So in order to discover the type of questions we want to answer, we've already been working with our lived experience experts, our clinicians, our clinical researchers, our translational and basic researchers to help us come up with specific priorities. And we've drawn this picture to demonstrate how the roots of the BDRC really are the themes that have been identified throughout the State of the Science process and through the National Research Blueprint process, where people centricity, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and collaboration are the foundation for everything we do. The spanning topics that have been identified are understanding at a more basic level why people who have bleeding disorders actually bleed, getting improved and novel diagnostic tests so we can shorten that diagnostic journey for people who are experiencing bleeding, and come up with novel and adapted therapeutics to better treat and potentially even cure people with inheritable bleeding disorders. And all the while looking at impediments to participating in research and to receiving the care that people deserve. The branches of this tree are really each area of scientific interest, and that includes the lived experience and bleeding in general, and particularly female bleeding, looking at joint and bone health. We're lucky now that we are looking at lifespan issues in people with inheritable bleeding disorders. When I started my career, did not have the benefit of having people getting old as they had hemophilia. And finally, each leaf is one of the specific research priorities, and we don't have enough room to list each one of those. So next slide. So I'd like to pass it back to Maria and Sammie and have them talk about how anybody who is involved in this webinar live or who's listening to it on the NBDF website can actually get involved in the process, because we will only succeed by having the deepest and most impactful involvement possible. So back to you, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Recht. So we all saw how we've been the BDRC. We've been doing this for 5 years, and we have learned along the way on how to partnership in meaningful ways with that lead community, right? Sammie kind of alluded to it. We started as making them part of working groups and giving them that place at that table. But eventually we learned that they were eager to help, that they were passionate about the research process, and that they actually wanted to get involved more and more. So that's how the term lived experience experts happened. That's how, instead of being part of a working group, we wanted them to give them their own working group so that they can think about how are we going to ensure that lived experience is at the center of the research process, right? Having help us or tell us what the role was. And so, we as this initiative mushrooms into something greater than anything that we have ever experienced or done, whether it's bleeding disorders or in the scientific community. We want to continue that momentum. We want to make sure that you understand that we value that involvement, whether you're an LEE, you're a healthcare provider, you're a researcher, and then creating spaces for that engagement to occur. Next slide, Naomi, please. All right, so why? Like, why do we want to engage with LEE in addition to, have them give us their perspective? Because we truly think that doing so will ensure that science is aligned with with real unmet needs, not the unmet needs of the people that we think we serve, but actually you're telling us where's the unmet need and how we can tackle them. What can we do to address them? So, because research studies must align with those patients' needs, with your concerns, and with your preferences. We also truly believe that it enhances the research study design. It decreases participation burden, right? Participants that live life, that go to school, that have work, that have kids, families, etc. Like, how can we design a study that is actually aligned with the little time that you have to offer, for example? Increasing diversity and representation. That's very important for us. So how do we get to those communities, those populations that have been historically excluded for research? You guys have the key for that. LEEs have inside knowledge that can help us break those barriers and ensure that happens. And really defining secondary outcomes that align with the real world. How are we measuring success? Is it only factor level? Is it only bleed rates? Or can we measure it in other ways? The way you take part in activities of daily living, or you take part in family outings, or quality of life issues, etc. Mental health is another important, right? How do we measure success? We know that you can help us promote enrollment and retention. We work in a community of rare disorders. We need each one of us to participate in the research process, whether you're a researcher, a healthcare provider, or an LEE. We need every single one of us. So how do we promote that enrollment? How do we promote intention? How do we engage you early and often so that you understand what you're signing up for, truly understand, and you feel confidence that it was designed in the most thoughtful and the most comprehensive way? And when we know that when you feel heard, that you're more likely to participate. And that's what's going to move the scientific needle forward. And then, more importantly, we know that it takes an average of 15 to 17 years to make so that those findings actually make it to the clinic, actually make it to treatment. So how do we change that? And we know that healthy adoption of the new findings into the clinic, if we have that LEE vehicle that will actually help us transport those findings in that literature to actual practice, it's going to actually come a long way with that. So I'll now pass it on to Sammie so that she can give us a little insight as to her why and what she's learned in the process. Next slide, please.
So, thank you, Maria. My experience when I got started was because I had, we were fairly new to the diagnostics of our bleeding disorders when we got involved. And every time we go to the doctor's office, to the HTC's office, they always ask, do you want to participate in this study? Do you want to participate in that study? And I always said yes because I always knew that research is the only way to get answers and new treatments and things like that. But once you signed up for that in the clinic, you never heard anything else past that. They take your blood and send it off for whatever study they're doing, and that was that. You didn't hear anything, you didn't know anything. So with this and having our voices heard, that's one of the things we did bring to the table, that we want to know more. We want to know what is happening with all of this. So we have put it into the blueprint that will be told. You will get an update on what's going on more often, quicker, and then just being able to be at the table. And one of the working group members from the Lee working group came up with the saying, "Nothing for us without us." So we don't just want to seat at the table, we want to build the table. So therefore, we will be involved. But in order to get to that point, we have to have an army of Lees. And at this point, we don't have that. And we know that some, just, they're okay with just giving their blood and moving on. And then there's others who want to be at the table and want their voice heard. So with doing the curriculum, you will get to whatever spot you are comfortable with. And that's the other thing. We want to make sure that it's accessible to all, to the underserved communities, to the immigrants, to everybody. We want to make sure that your voice can be heard. So at being at the table, the researchers are going to go through the same exact curriculum that the Lee ambassadors will go through. So they will have the same experience as you have coming to the table. And that's the vision that we have. That's the vision that we had coming out of the NRB going into the BDRC. Back to Maria.
Thank you, Sammie. So next slide, please. So these are just examples of MBDF's were some of our accomplishments by including that lived experience expert perspective. We now have LEEs who have co-authored, published, and helped disseminate our works. You see Sammie over here telling her story, how she was involved and all the things that she has accomplished to date. They also help us with the plain language summaries that Dr. Recht alluded to. Because we think it's important that not only are we publishing this information, but we're actually doing it in an accessible way. CVR was built from direct input from the communities, and our surveys continue to be enhanced. Our dashboard continues to be enhanced through, meetings with people who are participating or who are not participating, so that we learn more. What would make this a tool that you would want to use, that you would want to engage with? We've actually revised clinical trial recruiting and supporting documents to simplify, concepts, or to ensure that people who are participating in clinical trials actually understand what they're signing up for. They've helped us define key secondary outcomes and develop psychometric tools. So that means any instrument that we use in a research study to measure impact, to measure outcomes, LEEs can have been a part of. We've expanded inclusion-exclusion criteria. We've relaxed hormonal therapy restrictions for women in some instances, and in another, we increased upper age limit, right? We had said they were conducting research in 18 to 65, and a person who was beyond 65 said, "What about me? I want to participate in research." And, the researchers took it back and they said, "Oh, okay, I think we could do that." And so they extended that half-life. And those are, little things like that perhaps when challenged in the right way can actually expand and make it more reasonable to involve more LEEs, to increase participation. And of course, anything that we do has resulted in increased recruitment and enrollment. Next slide, please. All right, so the next couple of slides. So you saw Dr. Recht's slide. We started with the SOS, around COVID time, and now we're and beyond, right? 2024 and beyond. So Our NRB working groups manuscripts have been submitted. We were submitted a couple weeks ago. We're very excited. We should hear back in about a month or so. We created a LEA Research Advisory Council, and this council is LEEs from diverse backgrounds, represent diverse bleeding disorders. They're helping us. Their first task is to help us develop that research ambassador program curricula. What do people need to meaningfully engage in research? And we want to make sure we get to a point in which when people want to sign up and want to do the curricula, they actually have a good understanding of the research process so that they can actually voice their opinion in the best and most meaningful way. We continue to refine the concept of minimum viable product. What are those early projects that we can prove that the BDRC, involving the lived experience and health equity, diversity, inclusion principles, involving them actually is going to generate better science, better research. We continue to engage with potential partners, both old and new. We continue to seek various funding opportunities. And we continue to update the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative page that includes research priorities, presentations, publications. And if you sign up, you can receive updates. So just a quick screenshot. Next slide, please. Quick screenshot of what that looks like. So if you go to our website, bleeding.org, and you go to the research tab, you have everything that we do in there. The far right, you'll see Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative. That's where you'll find everything. The last page is where all the resources are. Any publication, any presentation, you can find there as well. And you can also sign up to become a lived experience expert. Next slide. A little shameless plug for our subscribe button. If you want to hear from what MBDF is doing in all aspects of our organization, you can subscribe, decide what kind of communications to get, and we can maintain you updated as to what we're doing. And in the last slide, that's almost last slide. So in summary, Community Voices in Research facilitates a direct interaction with LEEs to guide the pursuit of questions directly impacting our community. The Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative is a big umbrella now that will transform the way research is pursued in bleeding disorders. And MBDF initiatives embrace the framework of health equity, diversity, and inclusion because the ultimate goal is achieving health equity for all. Next slide, please. But before I part, I wanted to stop and say thank you, because not only have we been doing this for 5 years, but we've been doing it hand in hand with hundreds of people from inside the bleeding disorders community and outside, and that have dedicated their expertise, their time, and have been selfless in their commitment to the initiative. So, and that's what really driving our success, the success that it's really making an impact, and that that will help us shape the future of BDRC, of bleeding disorders in general. So I really wanted to stop and say thank you for people like Sammie and everybody else who's at home with their very busy lives. And now the last slide is not only are we opening for Q&As if you guys have any questions, but also a couple of QR codes that link you directly to Community Voices in Research and a contact form in case you want to be specifically signed up for Lee Center research initiatives. So I bring back my co-presenters, and Naomi, if you want to help us through the Q&A process, please.
Yes, thank you again to our wonderful panelists today, Dr. Recht, Sammie, and Maria. Thank you so much for your time. Now it's time for us to jump into the Q&A. All right. So we had a few questions come in, and looks like our first question is for you, Sammie. Okay, Sammie, we want to get a better understanding of what your experience was like working with the Bleeding Disorder Research Collaborative, and further than that, how have you been involved today within the research team, if you can share that with us.
So I've been very welcomed to the group, and if I ever our chat, the SOS anonymous. And so
Sammie, you're having a few technical difficulties. I just muted you, and I'm going to unmute you and see if that helps so we can get your answer in. Okay, let's try again. All right, try again and see if that may help. You were giving us a great answer there.
Did that help at all?
Yes.
Okay. So I was very welcome from the very beginning into the table, but they started off with a lot of acronyms, and I was like, whoa, 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 what is this? So as you'll see in the chat, they now spell out every acronym at every meeting. There's tables. We have cheat sheets available when you go to a meeting, because if you're not in that community to start with, you weren't brought into those. And then even new employees need that. We've had a few new employees join the research team since I've been around, and they went, yeah, that was good. So, but yes, it's been very welcoming. If I don't understand something, they don't have a problem stopping and helping me through. With doing these papers, we just submitted. There was a few times with them going back and forth with all the comments. I had to say, wait, how do you do this? What are you guys doing? And they, slow down, take a minute. So, I mean, really, it is very welcoming, and it is a very open community, and they want our help. They're not stopping us in any way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that question. And we love having you. So thanks for being a great part of our team. Okay, so this one can either be for Maria or Dr. Recht. As we look ahead, what actions or changes would you like to see in how the community participates in and influences bleeding disorders research?
Maria, you want to start with that one?
No, you go, and then
I know you have some really good thoughts about this, so go ahead.
So, I think that since we've come a long way since the moment we started to the moment that we are right now, right? I mean, I think that it was all a dream, and it was all a concept, a very abstract concept of how do we know we want that perspective in there. We just don't know how. And we don't know how it's going to be received, right? Like, we don't know how researchers who've been doing research for a long time they're going to feel about that. But what we've learned is that there's interest. People agree that that's a valuable perspective to have there. What I want in the future is that we can continue to grow as a community to not only acknowledge that there's a benefit to that, but to actually make it happen. So from our BDF standpoint, we are training that army of LEEs, like Sammie alluded to. We want them to be educated because we want them to feel like Sammie feels comfortable. Wait a minute, I don't understand anything that you're saying. Can you tell me what it is? So because I want to give my opinion, I need to know what you're talking about. Or that you have the terminology, or that you understand how research is conducted, so that you have your own ideas and you can offer really meaningful contributions. And so what I want for the future is that we're actually create those opportunities for that magic to happen, and then be able to then generate gather the rewards of doing research hand in hand with people who are most affected by them.
I concur.
Great. Awesome. Well said. And someone asked a question about caregivers. Are they included in CVR?
People, when we say people most affected by bleeding disorders, we also talk about that unaffected sibling, right? The one that couldn't go to the movies because their brother had a bleed, or their sister had a doctor's appointment, or they were in the hospital, right? So what happened to that sibling? We also want to know about that spouse. You're trying to help them, but they've been independently taking care of their bleeding disorders for all their lives, and they don't necessarily need you per se, right? So where are those points of what are those challenges that we can actually identify and address? Mental health, all those things are not only carried by people who have a diagnosis, but also people who live with those diagnoses, people who live with loved ones who carry those diagnoses, right? So yes, healthcare givers, loved ones, spouses. As long as you're an adult, you can participate in CVR, and also in all our initiatives. We've been working with NY Liars, which are young our young, community members. We've worked with them in all things research, so everything in our research department, and we've worked with our advisors who work in, some of them are carry a diagnosis, some of them are related to somebody who carry a diagnosis. So everybody has a unique perspective that's different from Dr. Recht, who's a hematologist, who's been in practice for many years, an incredible researcher, myself, who have been in the clinic for 20 years. I know so much, but I don't know that experience. So that's why we think it's so unique and so important that people with diverse perspectives to actually come together to make it happen.
Love that. Thank you so much. One final question. We have interest in how is the BDRC being funded?
Oh, that's a good, I think
That's a good question. So as we've moved into the BDRC phase of this entire process, we have been furiously writing grant proposals, talking to people who may be interested in funding such a network, working with both government sources of money and foundational sources of money, to get behind really how we're trying to transform. We don't have a set long-term funding source at this time, but that is not because we're not working really hard to try to get that to start coming in.
Thank you. Well, that was our last question for this conversation today. Just want to thank everyone who attended today's Wednesday webinar presented by the research team. A recording of this will be available immediately following this conversation on the NBDF website, and you can check it out there. I will, I'll also be sharing helpful links and information for all of the attendees later this week. So thank you so much again for your time today. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, our panelists, and our lead speaker, Sammie. And I hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.